Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here with the System Simplified podcast, where we interview top entrepreneurs, founders, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And this podcast is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group. At Business Success Consulting Group, we create custom processes and tailor-made business systems so businesses can thrive and grow. And today's guest is Glenn Diehl. Hello, Glenn.
Hello, Adi. How are you today?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing very well. Thank you.
Awesome. So, Glenn, I'm so excited to have you on this podcast because you are a successful entrepreneur. You own your business now for over 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
You are very much into processes and procedures and efficiency, and we're going to have a great conversation about it.
Yep.
So, the name of your business is Genesis Exhibits, and
Correct.
You are a leader basically in the live events and exhibit arena.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
As I said, you've been doing it for over 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
And before we even start the conversation, I want to make sure that I give a big shout out to Michael Oberthor, who introduced us.
Yes.
And he connected us and he said, Adi, you have to talk to Glenn. He is all about processes and procedures and have been able to scale his business successfully with doing that, with implementing systems. And you and I had a great conversation about it. And I'm so excited to share it with our listeners.
Great. Same here.
Cool.
Same here.
So, Glenn, it's always good to start at the beginning, at the genesis of everything, right? So what's the genesis of Genesis Exhibits?
The company actually started under another name in 1983. And I purchased the business in the late 90s. And we rebranded the company under Genesis Exhibits about 5 years ago. And we did that when we diversified our supplier base. So we refreshed and relaunched the new brand, I think, to position us better in the marketplace.
Awesome. So what got you into that field, into this industry?
And, I was the accidental entrepreneur. I was playing the piano in a restaurant, and the office manager for the local trade show exhibit office came in and borrowed a piece of music from me and returned it and said, you should be in the trade show and event business. So I went and interviewed. I was in my mid-20s then. Went and interviewed with the local owner of a distributorship, and he hired me. And the rest, they say, is history. But I got into it not because I did some great research and decided this was the best industry to join. It was just something that kind of found me through happenstance.
The right place, the right time. And you said yes to that opportunity. You could have said no. You could say, no, I'm going to continue playing the piano.
Yep. No, it's turned out to be a good fit. We find in our industry, it's very much a fit business, that people that come in either love it or hate it after a year. And if they hate it, they say it's too much pace, too much change, too much diversity, short lead times, whatever. Or they say, I love it. Every day is different. We're problem solving. We're, highly creative. There seems to be no middle ground. So
interesting.
After all this time, I'm kind of a lifer. I can't do anything else. So I'll keep doing this.
Understood. So tell us a little bit about your business and who are your clients and what do you do?
Sure. Our core business is we are designers and builders and supporters of all manners of live event business, primarily trade shows and conferences, but we have diversified over the years, and we do things like mobile tours, We just completed a retail installation in a sports facility. So any place where you need to create an environment and communicate with your customers, prospects, or employees, like a sales conference, we can create that environment and produce the experience. And we are, to your other question, we are industry agnostic. I mean, for many years being a New York City centric company, we're very strong in, things in that local market. So finance, publishing, technology, et cetera. But we have a diversity of clients across all industries, and we have executed projects globally, everywhere from Uzbekistan to Dubai to Vietnam to Sao Paulo. I mean, we can go virtually anywhere and produce the live event.
Incredible. So, the first, when I hear live events, we're just coming out of the pandemic, how did the pandemic affect you?
Dramatically. We had built, I think, a successful company, and unfortunately, after our PPP money ran out, I was in a position where I had to restructure the business, and I lost upwards of 90% of my staff, who we could not retain. We then went through a restructuring and reconstituting of the business, and just about the last 12 months now have seen a recovery, but 20 and 21 were very, very difficult, no doubt about it. Think of us in terms of, restaurants, hotels, airlines, anything that brings people together, sporting facilities. We fall under that same category. As people know, all trade shows and conferences, they were all canceled.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it definitely is in that category. That's why I asked that question. But, so you definitely have the experience of the good and the bad, going up, going down, but you're still here and the business is recovering, and you're here different lessons. You went through, being in the industry for 35 years, you have seen different, the ups and the downs and the different aspects of a business and what happens, right?
Sure.
So let's talk about it. When we met before the podcast, you mentioned about the difference between how you look at the structural part and the procedural part, right, of a business.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us more about that theory and how you look at those things.
Sure. On the structural part, the business has gone through an evolution that follows by both the sophistication of the physical products that we take, the diversity of the markets that we go into, and then the skill set that's required of the individuals. So it used to be, when I started, back in the 80s, that the account executive did virtually everything. They did design, they did estimating, they completed the order, they did the delivery. It was kind of a one person operation in terms of the getting a project across the finish line. As the products became more sophisticated, the market diversified, the skill set that was required really exceeded what most individuals are capable of doing. Salespeople are salespeople. They're not always great administrators.
Right.
So structurally, the company changed by having more finite job descriptions for project managers and dedicated designers and installation and construction technicians, whatever. So it rightfully followed the evolution of the product and the market. And then that led into the procedural part, because when one person did the entire project, you didn't need many procedures because they had everything in their head, or they were doing everything themselves. The question on the procedural side is, how do you pass the baton of information through a system so that everyone in sequence is conversant with the complexities of the project and can successfully, deliver it. So it was sort of that parallel evolution of the structure and job descriptions, and then the need to have the procedures catch up with that.
Right, exactly. So definitely one of the reasons to document the processes and procedures is so you can actually so each person knows what they're doing, and also bring on new people so they know how to produce the job, and do the work. What other reasons do you find throughout your career why processes are so important to a business?
Well, it even bleeds back into the recruiting process, so as you better understand the processes required and the skill set in each of those steps, then you can recruit better. You also then begin to discover the areas of efficiencies that you can build in that then create higher profitability. So, and it's not always trading technology for people. Sometimes it is, but sometimes it's having the right job description for that person and then very tight SOPs so that when somebody, sits in that seat, they know exactly what is expected of them. And again, that's always an evolutionary process as the business itself changes, because there are things that we are building into projects now that we never touched in the 80s and 90s. 3D video walls and all kinds of interactive platforms. They didn't even exist, back in the 90s.
Right.
So you need somebody with a different skill set and aptitude to incorporate that and then properly execute that.
Absolutely. So that's, to keep up with the innovations, right? Especially in an industry, if you're in an industry that you have to keep up with the innovation, you also have to make sure that the processes and procedures keep up with that innovation. And also, as you mentioned, to train people, right? To scale the business, to move to new markets. That can be a reason as well.
Yep.
What would you say is your ROI, or how do you measure the ROI of actually having systems and processes in place?
Aside from your financial statements, I've always watched certain benchmarks, and it can be very simple, but I found them to be consistent and accurate. A revenue per head number for the top line is something that I've always checked. And I have colleagues in the same industry. Let's say they might get, for instance, $100,000 per head of revenue in their organization. We have consistently exceeded that by 30 or 40%. So what that says to me is we've got, I'd like to think we've got good people, or, I don't know, I wouldn't say better people, but good people, or the right people. But that it's that marriage of the right people and the right processes that create the higher ROI. So that's one of the things to watch. And the other thing is to, especially when you're investing in technologies, to make sure that you're culling as much value out of that investment as possible. If you buy like an accounting software and you're only using 2 of the 7 modules that are available in that, you've probably overpaid. You probably could have gotten another software that did just what you were using as opposed to buying the entire suite. So we've been through a couple of different software suites or financial services or accounting services over the years, SAP, and quite frankly, part of the restructuring of the business is we've settled just in the higher level of QuickBooks. And so that's obviously less expensive, but it is giving us just what we need now, not more than what we're actually going to use based on the size and scale of the company.
That
So
makes
it's just
sense.
one example. Yeah, it's just one example in the financial services and the accounting end, matching the right technology with where your business is at and not overpaying for it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So let's go back to the revenue divided by head or by the number of staff. That is a great efficiency measurement, right? Because you can see how efficient and how lean the organization is running. And it can also be used to decide when you need more staff, right? Because if you determine that, you have a certain benchmark of, let's say, for instance, let's give our listeners an example. So let's say you have a business that is 10 million and you have 20 employees, so including yourself, so you have 20 staff that are actually working in the business.
Right.
So that will be 500,000 per employee.
Correct.
Doesn't mean that the employee makes 500,000 because, there you have all the expenses. We're just talking top revenue. It's just a number that gives you an idea. So if you can run the business and still generate 10 million, but with 10 employees, then you can have the revenue per head will be $1 million. So that obviously you're more efficient because it shows you the efficiency of the business. But if at some point you continue hiring, let's say you hire more employees and let's say now you have 40 and now the revenue per head is 250,000 and you see that, and you were able to operate before where it was 500,000, you know that you're not as efficient, right? And then you also know at what point your employees are going to be overworked or you won't be able to make it with the number of employees that you have. And you can set up, when you have those numbers, it really helps you understand the efficiency of the organization and manage by it. So I think it's a great metric to use. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
Sure.
You mentioned
we've been able, if I can interrupt, we've been able to parse that down by function. So for instance, I know a good project manager in our business can support between $2 and $2.5 million in revenue. A designer, however, is probably, if you tie their design work to jobs that result in a win, is probably closer to about $1.5 million. So when you get it by job description, if you can match the job description and the revenue ceiling to that, it helps you expect certain performance by function, but then also allows you to scale the departments properly, so that if we're a $10 million company, I could have 4 project managers, but I may need 6 designers.
Right.
So the more precise we can be by job function, the better off we'll be.
Right. So you take the top revenue and you divide it by the number of people in that particular department, and you get a number for that department. Then you take the top revenue divided by the number of people in the other department, and then you know what it is for that department. And obviously, you know what it is right now in present time as you are doing it, or whatever. Like you can go on historical numbers and see, okay, like when we were doing really well, this is what the number was. You can see how much you can push it until you have to add an additional person. And then that's the way you continue to create those benchmarks. So I think that's a great advice.
Right. This is definitely anecdotal and informal, but one of my favorite interview questions that I ask people is, have you ever cried at work? And when I go by a project manager's office and they're doing, 2 to 2.5 million, but they're crying at their desk, that to me says we might need to hire another project manager so you're not burning people out.
Absolutely. And that's really important. I know that people are really important for you because you are when we talked before, you're definitely a big proponent of having the right people in the right seat. And also, if they're not in the right seat, move them either internally or bring somebody that actually fits that seat better, right?
Sure.
So if we look at the different plateaus that you have reached, or the scaling process. The way I look at the scaling process is you reach a plateau, then you move to the next one and the next one and the next one, right? Mm-hmm. While maintaining profitability and growing. So what advice can you give to other entrepreneurs how to move from one step? Like you work really hard, you kept going and going and going, and you reached a certain plateau, and now in order to scale you need to reach the next one, right? So what are some of the things that you need to look at? Whether it's, do you really have the right people in the right seats? Maybe the people that were there could get you to the certain point, but then what do you do for the next point? Maybe a trusted advisor, maybe as an accounting system. Like what was your process of getting you unstuck from each plateau that you reached throughout your ways up to where you are now?
Well, I mean, going back to where the business started, I started with the principle that salespeople, account executives, are the only people in the company that generate revenue. So if they are doing anything that isn't directly tied to generating revenue, then we are putting a cap on the growth of the business. So everything that I could take away from a salesperson and give to somebody else, as long as we could cover the cost of that other person, then we would see revenue growth. So that's on the kind of the personnel side. So that's just one example. On the procedural side, I mean, I've gone to my VP of operations over the years, and even going back to when we had like paper forms that we were filling out, and now everything's done online. But I got to the point where if we had 5 documents to complete by a salesperson to finish a project, I wanted 4. If we had 4, I wanted 3. If we had 3, I wanted 2. So we've got it to the point now where on the front end of a job, an account executive gives us one download on the project that they are developing for the client, and then a project manager comes alongside them and carries the process forward so that the account exec can go find another opportunity. So it's sort of accepting people for who they are and who they aren't. And you know what the Peter principle is, right? The people rise to their level of incompetency. Rather than have a negative spin on that, I say, people work at their highest efficiencies based on what they do well. And instead of being frustrated with them for what they don't do well, just accept them for what they do well and supplement the other side with somebody else that does the other thing well. I mean, it's not rocket science, but I think too often entrepreneurs will hire somebody and they have an idea, especially as a small business owner, you're thinking, I can do everything. I'm the business owner. I can run the whole company, and you're not going to find somebody else like you all the time. You're going to find people that have a portion of your skill set and put them in the right seat then and support them to their highest efficiency. Don't be frustrated that you're not surrounded by other yous. It's just, I've just seen that with colleagues over the years, and I just tell them, I say, well, then stop trying to hire another you. Just hire people that do different parts of what you do well and put them in the structure, and then let them succeed.
So true. It's like put them where they belong, train them by giving them the processes and procedures that they need to do, set the expectations like you said at the beginning, and then let them run with it and let them succeed. And to your point, the way that you push the business up is you always looked at the process improvement, right? I mean, this process maybe got us to this point, but in order to get to the next point, we need to figure out how we can make it better, how we can make it more efficient, how we can incorporate more people here or more technology or the right technology. Are we spending the right amount on technology, and are we wasting money? So it's a constant process improvement, but because you had those processes documented and you knew what the processes were, you can go and analyze and pinpoint what can be improved.
Right. And I think especially for the entrepreneur, I remember working with one guy in a similar business years ago, and we were talking about the quality of our sales teams. And he said he was the best salesperson in his company. I said, that's terrible. So your company will never be better than you are. My goal is to be the worst salesperson in my company. And I intentionally run my business on what we call the upside down pyramid. I am at the bottom of the pyramid and everybody else is above me. So my feeling is, if I'm not giving them the clarity, the direction, the tools to be successful, then I'm not doing my job. So when I go to my staff, I say to them, do you have everything that you need to succeed? And if they don't, then it's my job to give it to them, as opposed to the top-down mentality that, berates people for not doing a good job. I assume that if they're not doing a good job, I first start with, well, what can I do to make it better for them? And then, at a certain point, people do Peter Principle out, and then you say, okay, this is as good as they can be or want to be. Well, let's either keep them and put them in a productive spot, and then you put a cap on what their income can be. That's where the job descriptions and the SOPs come in place. If somebody wants to be a project manager, but they don't want to be the manager of the project managers, then they are putting a cap on how much they can earn. And that's okay. Maybe they'll be happy just being the best project manager we have, but not having to manage other people. So just accept that. Don't be frustrated that, why can't I get them to, they're so good. Why can't I get them to take care of other people as well?
So it's really about setting expectations, right? Mm-hmm. And also hiring the right people that can adapt, that basically enjoy working in such an environment. I mean, one of the things you told me that you like to ask the question about, if you go to an amusement park, do you prefer a roller coaster or a Ferris wheel? I love that question. So tell us more about, what do you learn from that question?
Well, we all spend so much time, at work, and there's the emotional component in work is people know when they're not doing a good job innately. They're personally frustrated or whatever. And then to also have the right perception of the nature of the business. Every business has its own organic environment. So our business is very fast-paced, short lead times, highly creative, and we have been through, tremendous swings in the business on the revenue side, and I've had as many as 68 employees and as few as 4 over the last 35 years. I probably didn't need 68. I probably just hired too many at the time. But, the point is having a right understanding of, if people go to the amusement park and they like the Ferris wheel, they like a very controlled environment at a certain pace that gives you a nice view. But if they go and they like the thrill ride of the roller coaster, ours is a good business for them, because it's, the other analogy they make, it's like professional bungee jumping, where you strap the rubber bands on your ankles and you stand on the edge of the bridge and you're thinking to yourself, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. And then after you jump off and you're bouncing up, you're thinking to yourself, that is so cool, I want to do it again tomorrow. So you go from the idiocy of it to the thrill and the enjoyment of it. Well, that's kind of like part of our business. So.
Absolutely. Well, I see, but then I see the straps that you strap around your ankles. Those are the predictable procedures that you have. Those are the predictable systems, because then you know that you can still get the thrill, you can still get that excitement, but you have that security that you know what you're doing, because otherwise it's basically falling. It's like jumping off the bridge without it. You're going, yeah. So
right. You could do it once, right? That's about it.
And it's not such a smart idea. So, wow. So we covered so much in terms of knowledge and how to help businesses and entrepreneurs and give them advice. So all the way from hire the right people, know what to ask. I mean, know the expectations ahead of time, and then communicate that. Have specific job descriptions. So when you hire somebody, they know what you're going to expect from them, and set up those expectations. Document your processes and procedures and create systems, and continually watch them and improve them, and make sure that you are improving them. Definitely, as you are growing, make sure that you analyze what you have, how you do things, and how to make it more efficient. And have fun while you're doing it. I mean, that's one thing that's for sure. It's a common thread. You look at it as a game, it's kind of, you have this, you have that, it goes up, it goes down, it's a roller coaster, it goes here, but just like, why doing it if you're not enjoying doing it, right?
Right. That's very much again, the fit nature of the business. Everybody in my industry that has stuck around more than 5 years, when we get together for our industry meetings and such, there's a camaraderie there of like being survivors right now. The fact that we've survived the most recent events, but it's just people are wired a certain way. It's like being in the entertainment business. The people are wired a certain way for that, and those are the fits. That's the interviews that I do. I don't do many of them anymore, but when I interviewed a lot, I always asked questions that tried to pull out character traits from people, not necessarily just skill sets. Because I think if you hire the right character fit for your business, you can teach them the skills. And that's the art of personnel management as opposed to the science, maybe.
That is so true. And you can teach them the skills. So, I mean, if you have well-documented processes and procedures and training manuals, you can teach them the skills. But that fitting, like hire with a fit to your culture and who you need and who you are, that is tremendously important.
Yeah,
well, then in closing, what advice would you give to the entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now that haven't made it quite yet to 35 successful years in business? What advice can you give?
There was a book years ago called "If It's Not Broken, Break It." I guess never make the assumption that what you're doing today is the best way to do it. Always be willing to learn and to grow, and take the risk of maybe trying something new. There's I guess another premise that says if you're not failing at a high rate of speed, you're just not trying enough things. So we have gone in and out of diversification in the business over the years, where we thought something would be a good match for the marketplace, and it turned out not to be. But that's okay. It was worth the effort to try it, because if it was a good match, it would then take the company, to the next level. And some have succeeded and some have not, but it was worth the effort.
Absolutely. So you have to take risks. You have to be able to jump with that, but with a bungee cord on your ankles, right? So you know that if you can bounce, you don't like it, you get back. And maybe it's not going to be as fast as before, or there's going to be some setback, but then you regroup, you see what you need to do, and push forward. So great advice. Well, Glenn, it was a pleasure having you on this podcast and share your experience and your knowledge. Thank you very much.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.